Toast. What's cool about Gamma Haven is, at least at this time in Gamma Haven, is it's the beginning. So if you're a new character, this is the perfect time to come in and really start creating things. This is only the beginning of the second season. Prior to this, there was a prequel in the first season, but there's so much room, and there will always be room to add, but you are the players that are in the game from the beginning, and you have you can start sowing your seeds. Gamma Haven is not a place for good guys, it's not a place for bad guys, it's a place for good guys and bad guys and everything in between. So we don't cater to any particular kind of character, protagonist, antagonist. You don't even have to be a character that is full of superpowers and over the top. You can create a character that lives in the city, and the story will be tailored to your speed. But we have a lot of characters that have goals, and a lot of these characters are powerful characters, so that's why it always seems like there's so much going on and there's always action, is because we have some characters who, have an agenda. I say that to say that Gamma Haven is a great place for crime, and we have a lot of characters right now who are neck deep in crime and are all after some sort of control. And I'm looking forward to seeing how it all plays out, because we have some really, really big hitters. And it's just in time, because Zdravko Mas, the giant dragon-like gamma type who was mutated as a child and appears as a dragon who is has impenetrable scales and strength and endurance, and he can spit acid. He is a character who has grown up in crime from District 9, which is one of the most terrible places to grow up in other than the Shade District. But District 9, there's a lot of gang activity and underground crime and so on and so forth. So Zdravko Mas is actually making it his goal to establish a criminal empire. Now, the reason this is an issue is because not only is Zdravko Mas a powerful, I think he's about above average right now, rank. So that's one above where you start at. Not only is he a powerful character, but he has a really, really big big backing. He is affiliated with Deftitude, who is a major NPC and nemesis of the Instigator, another scientist who took it upon himself to go into the tank and operate from the inside as the Instigator does or did from the outside. Deftitude has his own goals and motives, and including Rezanok, as we saw in the first episode. And Zdravko Mas is with him, and he has Zdravko Mas with him because Zdravko Mas is a very powerful ally and someone to, pretty much protect him, and he's a mover and shaker in terms of the streets. And one of the things that Deftitude had essentially promised to Zdravko Mas is to assist him in establishing a criminal network in District 9 and all of Haven. And that's why in the last season, Deftitude assisted Zdravko Mas in breaking out all of District 9's top worst criminals, and he's forming an army out of pretty much really bad people of District 9. And so that's what he has right now. He has himself a small army. He has a lot of respect in the streets, and all of the characters who are throwing their hat in the ring of crime and underground, you will feel the effects of his influence. And that's what I like to promote in Gamma Haven. I tie everything together, and naturally you will all cross paths. The underground crime scene is the wild, wild west right now, but right now the sheriff is Zdravko Mas, unless some of you come in and change that. He's only above average, maybe high, So he's not too far from the starting point. So if you are looking to establish something in the air in the world, in the crime world, you're going to have to deal with Zdravko Mas. So that means either allying with him or taking him on. Again, he has some great allies. He has an army. He now has the Wang Gang, and we'll get into that. But Deftitude is also by his side, and Rezanok. If you don't know who these people are, feel free to get caught up on the previous episodes. But also, and this is another thing that I promote, if you're a new character, I am totally okay with you not knowing what's going on. To me, that makes it more realistic. That means that you would actually have to go either, because these characters in the story are in the Discord, they're in the game, they're there. So feel free to go and speak to these people to figure out who is who, no different than you would if you were to go into a real city and have to figure out what's going on. That's why Epony, she's coming from the islands and she doesn't know who any of these people are, but she's going to attempt to carve her own way, in her own path. But feel free to, leave a comment in the comment section if you have a question about any of these characters. Feel free to go to the wiki to read up and get some insight on your environment, and feel free, of course, to jump into the Discord and talk to these people. These characters that are in Gamma Haven actually exist in the Discord servers, and that's the cool thing about it. You watch Game of Thrones, and the characters are in the TV, and they're going to be there every week. But in between, so you're only left with their behind the scenes and talking on fucking HBO about the character that they play. But no, these characters, these are people that are in the Discord and you can talk to them. You can say, hey, Rezanok, why are you doing this? And Rezanok will tell you why. The world is yours. But there's somebody there right now and he's trying to hold it down. He's trying to take it away. He's trying to rule it all. It's about to get really, really crazy because there's some new blood. There's some new clans coming into this. From Dorinthia. Whew. Man, Looper, you're gonna have a lot to deal with. Jacob Bastion. But anyway, let's talk about what happened with I want to go over Zdravko Mas and Rezanok, Deftitude, and Nam. So let's start with Deftitude. In the previous episodes, we learned that Rezanok is a secret weapon of Deftitude's, an experiment that he has been working on this whole time. He brought in a species from outside of the tank that was not created like everyone else was by the instigator. And he brought this species in because he felt this species would be able to, with a little bit of genetic modifications, be able to achieve what the G2s couldn't. So Instigator or Deftitude invented the G2. A G2 is a gamma type 2. There's gamma types, gamma type 1s, gamma type 2s. A gamma type 2 was a G type that was supposed to be able to absorb in all of the data, all of the mutations. As opposed to spreading them all out amongst millions and trillions of other G-types. Just have one and build on one. But the Instigator was not able to produce a G-type capable of doing so without becoming an abomination. So Deftitude created one. And it was the first G2. And that was Saoirse. Saoirse is the one who has who created a little group, and they went and rescued R-Type X, and we'll get into that in another video. But so he makes Saoirse, but she disappears, and we learn that Deftitude thinks that the Instigator allowed her to escape. But if you recall, when the Instigator was talking about Saoirse, She disappeared on him as well. He didn't even know where she went, and he knew that she was in the tank somewhere, and he was afraid that Deathtude would find her. Whereas Deathtude thinks that the instigator was responsible for her disappearance, when really it was of her own will. She's a bit smarter and more aware of the tank conditions than your normal G-type, who doesn't even understand that they're in a controlled environment. So Rezanok was an alternative method of achieving what he was trying to achieve, which was creating a G-type capable of harboring every mutation. And it's cool because Rezanok's character, before even knowing all of this, was a character that was who had a knack for identifying, studying a G-type, and adapting their abilities into himself, or a version of their abilities unto himself. He looked at G-types like food, pretty much. He has a solo episode out there called Rezanok Origins that you can check out, where there's a scene where he goes into the Gate Center, contracted by Atlas. He goes into the Gate Center and he trains in their training room, and there's a little session, a little obstacle course. Long story short, he looks at them as food, and he's observing them, and he's using similar powers to them, and it's like a buffet for him. And we see things take a turn for the worse. Things get a little dark when his natural instincts start to come out, in order to force a G-type to use their powers, only to pleasure his own curiosity. So we were always kind of hinting that there was more to Rezanok than meets the eye. At the end of his Origins episode, we learned that his DNA is a bit different than everyone else's, and that's where we left that until now. We learned that Deathtude absolutely retrieved him from outside of the tank. He is an alien to this planet, and he is being reverted to his original psyche, his original mind state. So there were some things that were put in place in Rezanok's mind to, I guess, to force him to forget what he is and what he's capable of. And these were all repressed personas and psychological signatures in his head that were suppressed. And so Deathtude taught Nam Ki how to utilize her cards to manipulate his psyche, or the psyche of a mind, and trapped personas and trap personalities into her cards. And he taught this to her, and it was the same thing that Six knew. Six is a deceased member of Deathtude's squad, but Nam knows this now, and what she does is it seems like torture, but really they are restoring Rezanok to his true self. And after all of this happens, Rezanok is a monster. He's hungry, and Grinfall is what he's being aimed toward. So we see a scene where they appear right where Grinfall's going to land. So there's a scene where Deathtude and Nam Ki are coming out of that pocket dimension, and they appear right under where Grinfall is going to, the center of where Grinfall is supposed to land. And Deathtude pulls out Rezanok because he's going to unleash Rezanok to go right into Grinfall and absorb all of the data that is inside of that artificial meteorite that is designed to essentially patch every G-type on the planet, or in the city at least, with information, kind of like an update, which in turn evolves them. Deathtude is going to send Rezanok into that to absorb at least 77% of that information. And that's what happens. Meanwhile, they happen to be on top of a building owned by the Brass Knucks gang, which was created by one of our players named Chris, who is also the player of Void Makai. But Chris created he created a set of gangs: the Brass Knucks, the Zeos, and the Asshats. And they are gangs that are in District 9. But anyway, this happens to be the headquarters of one of the crime lords that are in the Brass Knucks. So they hear something on their roof, and they're like, yo, so what's that on the roof? Send something up there to take care of that. Turns out it's Deftude, Rezanok, and Nam. So Nam is tasked with making sure, no one interferes in Deftude and Rezanok's unleashing of Rezanok unto Grinfall. So unfortunately, the Brass Knucks, they come upstairs and they see these two individuals and they start attacking them. But Nam Ki, she is a powerful monk, and her fighting style not only involves her tarot cards, but it also involves the bangles on her wrists, really heavy metal bangles, different metals. And they pretty much, as she punches and kicks, they invigorate her strength. She uses the momentum to fly, to maneuver around and through other combatants. And she has the ability to invoke a nuclear flame, golden flames on her arms and out of her eye. One of her eyes is gold, the other is lavender. She's fucked up because that nuclear radiation that she uses also damages her as well. So she's always in a perpetual state of healing her wounds, because that nuclear stuff eats her alive, and it's driven by her emotions. So the more emotional she is, the more potent the nuclear radiation is, and it burns her, but not more than it burns her targets. Golden flames, golden nuclear flames, just burning and ripping through people as she punches and kicks them with her unique form of martial arts. They're no match for her. They can't even shoot. They can't even hit her with a bullet. One of them gets a punch on her, but she dismantles them fast. But as far as taking her out with guns, she deflects them, and one bullet flies into another person and they die. And she's a powerhouse, and she successfully handles that. Now, mind you, Nam Ki actually has some sympathy for Rezanok. She actually showed some concern. She was asking Deftude, she wanted to know from Deftude, like, why are we doing this? And he explained, and it made sense to her. But throughout this whole process for Rezanok, and it's been pretty hard for Rezanok, she's been there for him. And imagine just being sick in a hospital. You're very disoriented. You don't really remember everything. You're not totally coherent. You go in and out of consciousness. But you remember that one person who is by your bedside, and you associate their face with a comfort place. I believe that is what's happening with Rezanok and Nam Ki in his transition from the old Rezanok to the true Rezanok. It was traumatizing, grueling, and painful for him, but Nam was there for him and she was supporting him. And I think that has formed something. And I don't know if it's confirmed yet. I'm waiting on the submissions to see if either of them say something alluding to the fact that they're closer, because if that's so, that's what I would consider some really great role playing. If both players agree that both players agree that there's a bond being formed, I will reward that. No different than Nam Ki and Zdravko Mas, who were partners working under Deftude. There's a couple scenes that they shared together, showing their friendship, and I rewarded them with unique perks to their characters that they can utilize and keep in mind when submitting things. But the same thing will happen if Nam Ki and Rezanok were to form some sort of relationship, platonic, whatever. But anyway, speaking of Zdravko Mas, we see Zdravko Mas now off doing his own thing, Deftude. And what that is he is aware that Grinfall is about to hit. No one knows Grinfall is about to appear out of nowhere and cause everyone to mutate. No one knows that, except a few people. Drav being one of them, because Deftude told him. Drav wants to form a criminal empire of G-types that will serve under him. And there's no better place to hire criminal G-types than the Lap of Soak. Now, the Lap of Soak is a place where Zdravko Mas grew up. It wasn't called Lap of Soak back then. It was just a fight club. But he returns there, and it's a place that the Wang Gang took over. The Wang Gang is a very powerful gang created by one of the players, Gotham Pop, led by one of the most terrifying NPC antagonists in the game right now, Noxious Wong. But he goes to this fight club and he sits there and enjoys the festivities while waiting for Grinfall to arrive. And he's going to force whoever is left standing to work under him. Now, mind you, Ivan Bakara is very, very involved in the criminal underground. And if you don't know that, if you're in the criminal world, I highly recommend you take a look at Ivan Bakara's character sheet on the wiki. And just keep that in mind. He is someone that works from the shadows. So know what you're getting involved with when you're jumping into the world of crime. And that goes for Zdravko Mas as well. But we see Ivan Bakara lurking around in the club. You can find him in the club, cloaked full of shadows, looking for someone to kill. Nothing really matters. Bong, bong. Bong, bong. Bong, bong. Go G-type. It's mutation day. We gonna mutate like it's mutation day. We gonna hit the... Last time we saw Ivan, he had a cloak made for him by Selena Rend, who was an enchantress, using his own life force, putting it into a cloak, a piece of cloth forming a cloak that can conceal him in many ways. He's giving it a test drive in this club. No one can see him. He's walking around. But he is there for a reason, because Ivan too has his eyes on the Wang Gang, and he tells someone that works under him to recruit the Wang Gang, and if it doesn't happen tonight, kill them! But Zdravko Mas is also there for the Wang Gang, and we see what happens. The Wang Gang actually agreed to joining the criminal network, but Zdravko Mas comes and kills that person and says, no, you're going to join me instead. Now, the Wang Gang they knew of Zdravko Mas. He was always cloaked. He was always a cloaked figure. They knew that he ran shit. But they didn't know he was a fucking dragon. Alright? They didn't know that. They didn't know that until that night. So we see Zdravko Mas dismantle every single one of them and forces the Wang Gang to bend the knee. The Wang Gang is now working for Zdravko Mas. If you're getting into the crime stuff, the underworld stuff, I highly recommend you visit the wiki and you look at the Wang Gang, Noxious Wong, and Zdravko Mas' character sheet, as well as Ivan Bakara's character sheet. These are things that you'll have to deal with. Now, granted, when you start the game, you start off at average. Again, Zdravko Mas, I think, is above average or high. And Ivan Bakara, he's a bit strong, but he's more behind the curtain, so you may or may not hear from him. If he needs anything with you, he'd probably reach out to you. But just these are some important things you should probably know about, as well as Psycho Aurelio. It's ugly. There's a lot of terrible people, a lot of terrible characters that I personally wouldn't want to fuck with. But remember, it all comes down to the rank. It all comes down to the rank, as well as the details that you provide. But those details are only as strong as your rank. If the details are not supported or ensured by your abilities, then they're just details and they can be overwritten or challenged. So if it's daytime and you write in your submission that you want it to be nighttime, it's nighttime. unless someone says it's daytime. Now, if someone says it's daytime, I roll your rank against their rank, and then whoever wins, it's daytime or nighttime. But if they have an ability called time of day manipulation, when they say it's daytime, it's now supported by their ability. So they'd have an advantage over you for someone just your normal little detail versus their detail backed up by their ability. But if you both don't have an ability that can affect the time of day, then it's up for grabs, and whoever has the best, whoever wins the roll, that's what it will be. So just keep that in mind when you're dealing with a lot of people that are in your lane. Separate yourselves with how you approach things, because everybody's going to hit the streets guns blazing. But all it takes is for you to say, well, I have snipers up in the third window of every building on the block, and these buildings, the doors are locked. The doors are locked or hidden. That lays some details down that I would then consider if someone is saying that they are also hitting the same street. And depending on how they approach it, they may not find the doors, therefore not finding the people, the snipers you have. That's a bad example, but my point is details, details, details.